Hey folks, so it's Dr. Gilchrist here, and I wanted to finish up our section on learning and conditioning by talking about how we learn by watching others. Thanks for being so patient with this. I meant to give this to you last night, but as it turned out, I was not able to upload the file because my Wi-Fi at home was down all day long and did not pop up until this morning. So I hope it's okay that you're getting this today. So for the final section of learning and conditioning, I want to talk a little bit about how we learn by watching other people. So there are 3 different ways that we learn by watching other people. The first one is referred to as observational learning, and this will typically occur after at least one exposure to that particular behavior. We can also do modeling. So we utilize observational learning, and then based on that, we imitate what we see. We learn whether or not something works based on that imitation, and we refine our approach. And then finally, we do vicarious conditioning, which is where we learn through other people's experiences. So odds are pretty good if you had siblings in your family, you learned a lot about how to behave and how not to behave, and possibly even how to get away with stuff by watching your siblings go through those experiences. So are we actually wired to imitate other people? And there's research out there that actually suggests that we are, in fact, hardwired to imitate others. Researchers have found the existence of something known as mirror neurons. These fire both when we perform a particular action as well as when we watch other people perform those actions. And the idea behind it is that this gives us an opportunity to mentally simulate what is going on. And it turns out that even the act of imagining doing a particular task can help us function better, can help us remember things better, and can help us perform better later on. Other researchers have suggested that the existence of mirror neurons helps us learn empathy. It helps us learn by watching other people. It helps us put ourselves into another person's shoes and take on their perspective. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit more about observational learning. And probably one of the best known examples of this was research by Albert Bandura. So Bandura had a really famous experiment that your textbook talks about a little bit. Children were brought into a room where they watched an adult basically take an inflatable clown and hit it and kick it and hit it with other toys and yell different things and sit on it and knock it over and behave very aggressively towards this toy. And then in certain situations, these children were put into a situation where they were a little bit frustrated. So they'd go into a room full of toys, and the experimenter would basically tell these kids, oh, yeah, these toys aren't for you, they're for other kids. And so you create this situation where you're kind of frustrated. And then the child gets put in a room with an inflatable clown, just like the one that they saw getting beat up by the adult. And it turns out that for a good chunk of these children, they imitated what they saw. They would yell the same things that the adult yelled. They would behave and hit the clown in ways that they had seen the adult do. And what's really interesting is that in certain situations, they would either have seen the adult get punished for hitting the clown, or they saw the adult get rewarded for hitting the clown. That adult would get candy and things like that. But it turns out what's kind of interesting is that when children saw the adult getting punished for hitting the clown, they'd be less likely to hit the clown themselves. When the experimenter prompted the children later on, the children were able to imitate exactly what had happened. They were just less likely to do it because they had seen somebody get punished for it. When the adult was rewarded for hitting the clown, the child was far more likely to engage in that behavior. So what's really important here is that this really separates a distinction between learning and performance. Just because you're not performing something doesn't mean that you haven't necessarily learned it. Now, there are some interesting applications of this particular study. And one of the big things that we find is that violence can be modeled. If you grow up in a situation where you're exposed to a lot of violence or antisocial models, that includes in your family, in your neighborhood, or with the media that you consume, that will lead you to be more likely to model those things, to vicariously learn through those things, and think of violence as being a potential solution. But the good news is that these pro-social models can also be modeled for us. So if we are surrounded by good role models who behave in ways that are appropriate and more helpful and more positive, the good news is that we can learn through those as well. Now, interestingly enough, we do know that violent media can lead to an increase in expressed aggression. Now, typically this research is correlational. Other researchers have found this in a cause-effect relationship as well. So when we watch violent things or we watch antisocial or bad models, we're going to be more likely to think that that's how the world works. And that's not necessarily true. And research actually shows that viewing violent media actually can lead to an increased expression of aggression. So not only do negative models rub off on us, but the good news is that we can counteract that by choosing good models, choosing good positive media, and things like that. So that's really all I wanted to cover. There are some things in your book that I would recommend you check out, including some of the biological constraints on classical conditioning and operant conditioning. They might show up on the test. But other than that, we will start talking about memory next class, and I will see you then. Bye.